Beautiful Tashi, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's such a pleasure. I always look forward to our opportunities to connect and share your wisdom with our beautiful community. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
All right. So Tashi, some people in the audience don't know you yet, and you have a very interesting background. So can you please just tell us a little bit about your story, how you came to become a practicing astrologer, and how you came to actually practice both astrology and tarot?
Okay. Well, it's been a lifelong practice of mine. I was fortunate enough to be born into a family which practices both astrology and divination. I actually come from a long line of astrologers and seers, and you'd call them mystics as well. But I come from the fortunate time that I can actually bring these gifts into the world. In my grandparents' time, it wasn't acceptable. I think my mother, she's the only one who was able to do it in the West. She's retired now, but do it actively as something part-time in terms of working with astrology and divination. My first ever exposure to divining for the general public was at the age of 5 at a fair in Sydney. My mother set up a table for $1 readings, and all sorts of people were coming, and I was just reading the pictures on the cards, but it was a very good training to get into it, in the deep end, as my mother would call it. In terms of astrology, there's a strong lineage from both sides of my family, but I'm really drawn to what my mother's mother also taught me, based on the ancient Greek system and also working with the Hermetic law. My father's family would work with astrology, coming from a gypsy lineage, more with agriculture and just general everyday uses of medicine, and how to connect that with the body and the elements. So I guess this is what's brought me here. And above all, actually, I have to thank my lifelong teacher, Dzongsa Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, who allowed for this to become professional through his encouragement in 2010. I was always doing this secretly, but he really gave me the nudge to take it up as something full on. So I think thanks to him, I've come to this point.
Fascinating. I mean, I feel like I could ask you 100 questions just based on what you just said. One question that does come to mind, though, that I would love if you could elaborate on, because sometimes I hit it and I'm like, I don't actually know how to describe this. You differentiated between astrology and divination. How would you describe the differences between things that are between astrology and then things that are categorized as divination?
Okay. Well, an element of astrology is divining, but not necessarily the whole portion of it, because working with the planetary bodies and their influence on a daily basis, there is something already there, obvious in terms of its understanding. It's almost like a map when we look at our star maps, for example. So it's something that supports evolution. But divination, divining, working with tarot, or for example, coffee cup readings, mirror divination, we're really moving, the times, the 3 times, which is the past, present, and future, working with those in the now, which, many of us believe are accessible in the now. It's just relative if you look at the concept of time. But the key difference is the practicality that comes from divining. It really works with where the person, the querent, the seeker is at this point. Again, astrology is a map. It's a guiding light. But divination is working with what you've actually done with that, and then the answers based on the current situation.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's talk about tarot and astrology and the link. So first of all, which one came first? Is there like a mother? Or do you see them both at the same time?
Well, astrology, they would say, came first only because there's, cave paintings and all sorts of things in prehistory that point that out as being very obvious, being available to us to understand, okay, there was a, astrological connection to humanity at that point. Tarot is so mysterious. It's a secret doctrine. There are so many lineages that, come from all sorts of parts of the globe that link to what we know as the modern day traditional tarot. So based on history, I would say astrology, but actually, this pictorial working with imagery and divining has also been there since the very beginning, but not as black and white as we see the traditional tarot today.
Okay. And how about the link between the two? So I know they're very interwoven. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So I could talk a lot about this subject. Okay, so tarot, when we look at the traditional tarot, and I'm going to use the Rider-Waite as a good example, which has taken a lot of its inspiration from the Baldini 14th century tarot, which is an extraordinary tarot deck, but has also evolved from that and worked with various other universal tarots that happened around that same time frame. That particular tarot, what it does is it combines the Rider-Waite, it combines the elements, our principal elements, the 4 elements and the space element, combined with astrology, which has the elements in place there too, numerology, which can also be in some ways accessed through astrology as well, symbology, the secret doctrine like hermetic law interwoven in it as well. So it's bringing in all this occult but also important metaphysical information to support the seeker's quest. And astrology is a key, example of a seeker's quest and how to personalize that quest through actually seeing what influences come from our skies at the time of birth, right? So, they bring this in on purpose to support this particular journey because, without connecting what is above and below, without understanding that unity, there's no way we can ascend. And on this note, I will just quickly read, if you don't mind, an excerpt from the Hermetic writings, which can just explain it perfectly. He writes, O people of the earth, men born and made of the elements, but with the spirit of the divine man within you, rise from your sleep of ignorance. Be sober and thoughtful. Realize that your home is not in the earth, but in the light. Why have you delivered yourselves over unto death, having power to partake of immortality? Repent and change your minds, depart from the dark light and forsake corruption forever. Prepare yourselves to climb through the 7 rings and to blend your souls with the eternal light. So this is so important, this particular phrase and understanding. This has a tapestry throughout all concepts linked to astrology as well, as you know, but the tarot really grabs this phrase because we start with the Fool in the tarot, which is ruled by Uranus, if we look at the planetary energy. And that's the starting point of the seeker's quest, of the wildness, the uncanniness, the willingness to just do whatever, to just jump off that cliff and fly, ideally. But also coming with a lot of wisdom of knowing that what they're about to look for is far greater than everything they could have ever accomplished if they turned back to where they were.
Mm. And you said something really interesting. You said that we have to combine as like with within in order to ascend.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you say that?
Okay. Well, because everything externally is almost like a mirror, a mirage of what is taking place internally. And when I talk about internally, I'm not referring to just the body and what makes up our actual physical being, but what's taking place on an inner unseen level, which is also happening in the multidimensional levels of understanding. This unity, because we live now, our mindset is living in a very dualistic place. This union of external and internal, just as, when we're experiencing themes connected to love, when we're searching, for example, for the external ideal complementary flame, soulmate union, unification, it's actually a mirror of this quest. If you look at it, if you deconstruct it very finely, of this seeker's quest of longing for something that they can truly unify with. And love is a perfect example of this deep need. So in a dualistic world, we need both to rise above the dualism, which takes us to a supreme place.
Okay, awesome. So Tashi, talk to us a little bit more about the symbolism of the tarot. So you said the Fool is associated with Uranus. Can you
That's right.
tell us more about the symbolism of tarot and how it is reflected in the astrology?
Great. So I can talk about the major arcana, being, the principal, energies of the tarot, which trump the minor arcanas. There are 78 tarot cards in a traditional tarot card deck, which means we have 56 cards looking at the minor arcana, which are broken up into the suites of the 4 elements. And then we have the major arcana, which are, 22, which leaves us to 78. So those 22 go through connections to star signs, constellations, and planets. We have them all covered. And I'll run through all of them if you like, just so people can have a bit of a mental graph.
Yes.
So the Fool is connected to Uranus. And I'll just run through it and then I'll go into the why, okay? The Magician, Mercury, and the High Priestess, the Moon. The Empress, Venus. The Emperor is connected to Aries, the constellation of Aries. We have the Hierophant, which is linked to Taurus. And then we have the Lovers, Gemini, the Chariot, Cancer, Strength. The Strength card, wonderful card, is ruled by Leo. The Hermit is actually Virgo. The Wheel of Fortune, Jupiter. We have Justice, which is Libra. The Hangman, Neptune. Death, Scorpio. Temperance, Sagittarius. The Devil, Capricorn. The Tower card, which is Mars, and also has an affiliation with Scorpio, but, I'll go into that in a moment. The Star, Aquarius. The Moon card in the Tarot, Pisces. Then we have the Sun, which is the Sun as well. Judgment, Pluto, and the World, Saturn. So a lot of people wonder why, these cards were linked up to these particular constellations and star signs. But if you can see, there's a bit of a sequence. Growing up, I would refute a lot of these. For example, the Chariot, I'd always, feel like it should be associated with Taurus because of the stubbornness. And if you look at the Chariot card, you see like a drive, an inability to give up, just wanting to charge forth at a goal. So I'd always see this interpretation far more connected to a Taurine constellation than Cancer, for example. But if you look at the Rider-Waite interpretation, which in many ways I prefer than the Golden Dawn, even though I have such respect for the Golden Dawn, both overlap, but the Rider-Waite does bring in this hermetic law and understanding. There's a lot of Wiccan principle, which is fantastic because it works with beneficial alchemy, that's beneficial for humanity as opposed to the darker arts. And then it also brings in and draws in the understanding of the Baldini tarot from the 14th century. Now, I wanted to actually pull this up. I've got something here just so you can understand the whys behind the evolution. The Baldini tarot, which is, so ancient, they didn't have the cards as we see them now. The cards as we see them now, the traditional tarot did have to take on certain rules and regulations that came from the Catholic Church post-Inquisition, which brought in, influences such as the high priest. The high priestess remained, which is a great thing in most desks, but some actually had to expel that. So as you can see, it takes on this energy within the deck as well. The Baldini, has all sorts of planetary bodies as well as the muses. So you have like Urania, you're looking at Irato in the deck. There's also Apollo there, which is the god of light, of the sun. There's also cards that represent things such as grammar, logic, geometry, music. So it's bringing in the seeker's quest through poetry. There's all sorts of different depictions to, wisdom of understanding the seeker's quest, not just how it got kind of sandpapered down to be acceptable within humanity. So I think all of these cards have changed their representations over the course of time as well, just to suit the norm at the time. And, if we go again to the Baldini as an example, he obviously had cards that represented planets. So we didn't have to hide the planets within the cards. So there was the planet Jupiter as a card, there was the sun as a card. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting is because as you were going through it, I was like, well, why don't we just have the zodiac sign or the planet on the card? Like, why the like translation? But now I get it. So it had to hide during the church.
That's
time.
right.
Okay.
Posting time.
And can people get that other deck that you're talking about? Like, is that available?
I'm sure there are copies made of it, but there are actually only 3 or 4, hand-painted original copies of this deck in the world. Of course, because these were created, specifically for certain courts at the time. But I'm sure there are copies, like remade versions of this Baldini deck. But if that cannot be found, again, the Rider-Waite is fantastic, really energetically, and also as a learning point. If you want to get into tarot, it's great to learn working with that particular tarot deck. There's also one called the Solar Busca Tarot.
Can you say that again? The soul of what?
Busca. Well, I say Busca, but it's B-U-S-C-A, I believe. S-O-L-A-R. Solar Busca Tarot as well, which is, it has some energy connected to these original decks. And there is another one too. Yeah, the Tarot of Marseille. You can get copies of the Tarot of Marseille, which is also one of the original, tarots done. Again, sandpapered down, but just beautiful imagery. You can get a feel of that time, 14th, 15th, 16th century.
Okay. Would you be able to go through why the energies are associated with those, why they are the same? Like, why is Capricorn the devil? Why is...
By the way, I want to spell the Solar Busca correctly. S-O-L-A, and then it's B-U-S-C-A.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I always get it confused based on my own multilingual mind. Okay. Yes, I can do that. So I think we have to, when I do this, we have to go beyond our typical understanding of, what constellations and planets represent, and just open up to this understanding, because as I was saying, a lot had to get camouflaged and blended into the times. But if we do go into it, we do find that secret key, and there is a link, but it just takes a bit of contemplation. Okay, so the Fool and Uranus, as I was telling you, it's that uncanny, wild, electricity of just diving into the unknown, and the spontaneity of knowing that the seeker's quest is just going to lead to something so beyond and out there than what we could ever possibly expect it. So that wish, that drive to just do it, that spontaneity. And the Magician now, well, this is very obvious, working with Mercury, ruled with Mercury. If we look at the Magician card, we see all the alchemical tools right there on the desk of the Magician, and how he's got all the elements in his favor right there, everything he needs. It's just a matter of how he combines those ingredients. So this is linked to Mercury and the mastery of, turning things, transforming things alchemically into divine order. The High Priestess, connected to the Moon, the mysteries, the sacred and divine feminine energy, the unseen world, the inner world as well, in terms of our true state, the subtle body. The Empress, if we look at that card, we can see Venus instantly. So, the Empress card is connected to Venus, and just the riches and glories of life, the elegance, what it means to be sacred in your femininity, but to also share that sacredness, to be able to bring that out into the world, and have an abundance of it so everyone can benefit from that beauty, that grace. The Emperor is connected to Aries, ready to take action, ready to fight, to defend, to protect, but also able to conquer, and with divine and sacred masculine principles, being able to contain and understand environment through strategy, through structure, just being so united with the force of masculine energy and not being fearful of it, owning that power. So the great counterpart to the Empress. The Hierophant, which is all about, the protection and preservation of tradition, of doctrine, of understanding. In some decks would be seen as the Pope, and in ancient decks, the Guru. So the lineage master, the one who collects all information and brings it forth in a way that is in accordance with the law and divine order and lineage. So Taurus affiliated with this. There's been many question marks, but if you really look at it, there is a lot of accumulation when we work with the Taurus constellation. Accumulation is required. Wisdom needs to be understood through foundational practice, through things that have been there. So if we look at all the star signs, Taurus energy really does have this ability to bring everything in through what is accumulated, not just what is obvious, through study, through practice, through patience, through perseverance. And in ancient times, the constellation itself, Taurus, it's one of the first ones that was, depicted throughout all the cave paintings. It's really important, as well as Leo, and I won't go into that now, but, we're taking this as a primary constellation, something that was revered through, all ancient belief systems, the cult of Zeus, for example, and honoring the ox, the sacred oxen in the skies. So having this link to the Hierophant back in the day when they created the deck, it would have been giving the Hierophant, the Papa, like one of the best constellations, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So then we have the Lovers, Gemini, which is the lovers' marriage, the union of the twins, so the sacred polarities united as well. When we look at the cards, some cards depicted as the actual twins, or twin flames is a better way to put it, two opposites perfectly uniting, or of the same flame uniting, seen as the lovers. Now, Gemini energy also talks about the decision making that's required in this particular representation of the card. When this card comes forth, it's all about, making a very important decision. And a lot of it's got to do with matters of the hearts. And as you know, when we talk about love and lovers, there's always some kind of a sacrifice or something that needs to be put away in order for something to bloom. So this card talks about that. And the Gemini energy also brings in the mental plane of the energy of the card, which is the unification of these polarities through also understanding wisdom, and the foundational energy too, which is their physical union. So the mercurial energy, I think, is again only linked to the Magician. Some people confuse it and say, okay, if this card is all about, Gemini, it must have a link to Mercury, but it's not like that. We just define it to the actual constellations interpretation. So then we have the Chariot. As I was mentioning, what I thought should be connected to the Chariot growing up, I really understood later on why Cancer, was linked to this. And, the Chariot is all about endurance, commitment, being able to go through all seasons, all moods. In some cards, there's a lot of, water element linked to the imagery of the card, coming out of all sorts of stormy battles, stormy waves, and just persisting, being able to arrive to a destination. And Cancer again is all about that completion, that being able to obviously endure no matter what, but to have the emotional capacity to go through something too. And the Chariot does that. It doesn't actually exclude feeling and intuition and sensitivity when it's exerting its force. So if you can see the difference between the Emperor and the Chariot, you'll understand what I mean. So then we have the Strength card, which is ruled and connected to Leo. And, most of the Strength cards have got a beautiful lion on it, gorgeous mane with a lady kind of taking care of that lion, almost embracing it. Some have her lifting its head up as well, putting it in a posture, of nobility, bringing back that confidence, that strength into what it means to be this lion-like archetypal energy. But the beauty of seeing that, sacred feminine energy in the cards, in most cards, and the lion, is again showing this important unification of the polarities of understanding the sacred masculine and feminine energies, and also not being scared to own that nobility, which is within all of us, to feel empowered through what is inherent, through what is obvious, and also to also not fear the help that sometimes is needed to be able to rise up again. The Leo energy connected to the Strength card, again with the lion, the lion's mane, everything that is linked to this constellation. It's all there directly in the card. I think if there's one card that kind of says, look, this is obviously Leo, it's the Strength card, they weren't shy with that when they brought that in. So the Hermit is Virgo, and the Hermit card, I think you're all going to understand this actually. My lovely mother's a Virgo, and she would always, tell me, go on about the Hermit card, and how I have to understand, Virgos need their time alone. They need their space. They don't like too much physical contact. They need to have their time to understand things. And I was like, so strange. But, because again, you'd think the Hermit and Cancer, right, when you look at just the typical understanding. But then when you really go into the Virgoan energy, it's true. They really do need to be a bit of a recluse within themselves, at least. There are a lot of barricades there, like a protective net within to go through their own inner understanding, very pure like journey, if you look at it ultimately, to then be able to provide for and do what is required for the outer world. So the Hermit card itself does talk about this, the stillness within, in order to gather strength in many ways, to be of service, but also to accept this aloneness, this divine aloneness, which is a practice in itself. So the Wheel of Fortune, linked to Jupiter, which is the luck of the cosmos and things going in one's favor, divine fate spinning in a way that is indeed going in one's favor, and supporting the ring of events and this quest as well, this seeker's quest. Then we have Justice, which is Libra, which is also seen very clearly again with the scales in most tarot cards, an obvious connection to the constellation. And the Justice card has always been about divine order, divine equilibrium, law as well, law and order, but in a way that goes beyond the obvious eye of right and wrong. Yeah?
Yeah.
So then we have the Hangman, ruled by and connected to Neptune. And the Hangman is, a man or a woman suspended upside down in most parts, being in a very kind of standstill situation. The suspense is very evident in the card, but also seeing things from different perspectives, going into a more subconscious state of understanding, stepping away from just the ordinary way of seeing things, how you'd normally perceive things. So that, upside down position creates a whole other way of perceiving the world around. And the Neptunian connection is very much this: when you, delve into the arts, the dreamscape, you're not bound by logic most of the time. Yeah. So we're almost there. I'll keep going.
Yes, please.
Okay. So death is connected to Scorpio. And, the death card is all about the metamorphosis, the process of, the birth, life, and death portals within astrology and also within tarot, and all things linked to these divine realms. So the death card is that final point, an ending, which is also a beginning once done correctly, but very much linked to Scorpio for obvious reasons, because Scorpio is all about transformation, metamorphosis, being able to shed skin, being able to really end things in order to rebuild them. And then on a literal level, Scorpio is all about death, the death energy too, when we look at it. And this card has just grabbed Scorpio, which to me would be very fair if I was to choose one. But I think on a supreme level also, the death card during the time of the tarot, being formed, there was a lot of literal death right outside your door. It wasn't hidden away, really extreme wars and just seeing so much of it around. And I think they really did create this in a literal way, this card, to really bring out the awareness of this energy in its everyday understanding. And once upon a time, there was also a birth card too. So it wasn't just death. Yeah. So Temperance, Sagittarius. This is another one that I couldn't quite get, because you have, the water being poured from cup to cup, an equilibrium, a moderation that is put out there through this card. So, okay, Sagittarian energy does work with excess, but when the divine archer is mastered and our goals are actually clarified in a way that, has no error in what we aim for, then yes, some form of ability to have the moderation, to know the right balance and harmony of elements to bring about that result is powerful. But I think there was also a secret message around this card. And when we look at the hidden keys within the tarot, why the Temperance card has a link to a Sagittarius, I think the study of this card and going deeper into it will herald other understandings. We won't go into that now, but they were always searching for like a wild card, you know, like why is that placed there? And that kind of opened a door to a lot of secrecy, which led to a lot of divine law and truth. Yeah. So the devil card, Capricorn. Yes. So the devil card being the great illusion, what keeps us bound, what keeps us, you know, really kind of in this dream, the materialistic planes, everything that, you know, it doesn't let us rise up and ascend. Now, Capricorn being Saturnian, but I'll just focus on Capricorn, also being, you know, very much about the ambition, worldly pursuits, goals, what needs to be accomplished out there, the 10th house, basically. So this whole interpretation linked to the devil card was telling us, okay, you've got to understand the limitations of this energy, but also how easy it is to break free of it. You can work with that particular bondage to rise above it, to have goals that go beyond just the ordinary mundane and get swamped in that energy. So the devil card is a reminder of the limitations of the materialistic plane and how that can actually just bind you and keep you locked in prison. The card has people in chains and being held by this devil energy. But this devil, let's not take it, you know, as some monstrous being who is evil and, you know, he's out there literally. It's more about the traps that we create in our mind, in our reality, through binding ourselves to things that lead nowhere. And the illusion of it all, believing in things that are there but not there, you know, everything is transitory. So when we're grabbing onto things so tightly, we automatically fall into this dream, which is this bondage of the devil. So the Capricorn energy is about, you know, again, rising up, you know, the mountain peak, being ambitious to a point that takes you to the highest potential, not to keep you enslaved in that. Yeah. So the tower is linked to Mars. And, you know, the tower, there are various depictions of this card, but most of them show a tower, beautiful big tower kind of cracking, and there's lightning and there's people kind of falling out of the tower, and it's very dramatic. Why it's connected to Mars, it has an element of this energy connected to destruction, catastrophe, you know, the flames and the fire. But it also is linked to awakening, this card. And this is something that, again, hasn't been clearly understood with the planetary link, but through the imagery of the card and the interpretation of the card and the secret doctrine of the card, definitely is the card that could portray awakening, because that lightning strike in that tower of concepts, of everything that we've built just falling down, and that lightning represents illumination. So it's also saying, you know, in all this destruction that's taking place, or difficulty, concepts falling apart, there is wisdom right there, you know, sharp and clear, cannot be denied. So it's a very powerful card. The star is linked to Aquarius, and you would understand, you know, with the hopefulness, the wish-fulfilling hopefulness of the Aquarian constellation, and, you know, believing, always looking to the heavens, always kind of just having that positivity, that optimism, in terms of, you know, wanting to believe, and also in others and in humanity as a whole, and in the whole you know, collective consciousness. There is the strong Aquarian understanding linked to the star, which is about, you know, true aspirations and thinking of the whole. The moon in the tarot, the card itself, linked to Pisces. Again, because of this moon card in the tarot representing, again, the depths of the subconscious, not only the sacred feminine energy, it is there, but it isn't as much there in the tarot because of the high priestess, which really embodies that correct energy of the sacred feminine. The moon is very much linked to dreamy, obscure places in the tarot, you know, creativity, a lot of intuitive hunches and understandings. So whatever you understand with the Piscean constellation, it is very much there in the moon card in the tarot, in its own interpretation. And I think out of all of the cards, the moon and the sun in the tarot really are almost directly affiliated, if you look at the interpretations, to the constellation Pisces with the moon, and the sun itself as a planetary body with the sun card. Next being the sun. which is just great fulfillment, a lot of light, the sun card in the tarot, and it connected to the sun in our skies. It's like, everything's going to work out. You can trust, you can be confident. It really exalts all the meaning of the sun card as the sun planet as an influence, the planetary body as an influence. But it also, it's a completion card in its own way, because you can't get better than that. When you look at this card, it's like, everything will work out. It's a comforting card and a completion card to whatever the querent is seeking. Some would say, oh, but, could you see that as a card representing awakening? And depends on what other cards fall beside it in the Seeker's Quest. But it does show a completion and an almost, complete ascension result if you see the whole tarot put in the right order. So then we have the Judgment card, which is Pluto. And the Judgment card has always been quite difficult to interpret, because people, that have really gone into all the different tarot decks have, worried about just how much is this a card that cannot be, changed in terms of its weight. It comes with a lot of weight. And this weight is about, a panel of assessors, beyond just the querent's understanding, really trying to divine or put in order what needs to happen thereafter. So it's a moment of, judgment, as clear as we can put it, but without any, influence. You can't kind of maneuver it. And I think that's what people came to the conclusion when they did study the tarot is, yes, when this card appears, you cannot really maneuver it or get into any form of shifting the weight of this card. But the Pluto energy, just also takes you to this level of unseen, again, undercurrent, but transformative capacity, because once that decision is made thereafter, then there is this capacity for end to all of what was and some form of renewal. And Pluto is also very powerful. So there is a lot of power attached to this particular card. And then we complete this by looking at the World card, which again is a completion card. But I think on a grand level, it really is all the elements aligning, 4 elements plus space, bringing in this result in our timeline, in the world as we know it, this dualistic world, coming with the energy of Saturn, linked to Saturn, which is when, mastered, what has to be. Yeah.
Wow. Tashi, you have such an embodiment of all this. It's just like flowing out of you. And it's so clear that it's coming from a place of like lots and lots of experience and a level of mastery. A few more questions, and then we'll go into the divination that you're going to do for all of us. Number 1, the minor arcana. Is that also linked astrologically? And we're not going to go through it today, but are there also connections?
Definitely.
Yes.
There are connections. And also with the elements, with the 4 elements and the space element holding all of those together. But there are links to even birth dates, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Maybe we can do another episode on the minor arcana. Okay. And then also, how do you practice both astrology and tarot? How do you do that in your practice? Like, what does that look like when you're meeting with a client?
Well, knowing what days, working with astrology to actually divine, to work with tarot, it's not something that I do, from 9 to 5. It's all about divine timing, and astrology is such a firm backbone for that.
Okay. So you use astrology to choose the time to do the divination? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well. If I was to tell you how I do it. But in terms of working with divination, because, the tarot, when I'm divining, is so interwoven with astrology anyway, it's there, as a breathing mechanism within what I'm doing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they're just completely interwoven, pretty much. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. tell us a little bit, if there's people out there who are interested in applying what you just taught us about to their own. I'm sorry, Tashi, how do I word this question to get you to the point that you would like?
Okay. Well, it's about offering all of you just an easy way to divine, coming from me to you, so you're getting that instruction, working just with the major arcana. So all you need is any tarot deck that has major arcana cards, so traditional tarot, pulling out those 22 cards and divining, looking at things from an astrological perspective, as a good starting point, what you need to know, right?
Okay. So I'll ask you the question so that you can
Okay.
say, yeah. Okay. So Tashi, for those of our listeners out there who are versed in astrology, maybe, to different levels, maybe or maybe not versed in tarot, how can we start to use what you just taught us about the major arcana for our own personal divination?
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. So I will give you instructions on that now. I think it's important, orally to receive that from someone. And this is something I have got permission to give. So it's really special. Working with the major arcana, just the major arcana in any traditional tarot deck. This is very good for personal connections to the planetary bodies and constellations in terms of a form of divination. So if you just want to know what energy is very present around you, coming from divination as a divine sphere, you just single out those 22 cards and you find yourself in an environment where you feel safe. Make any form of offering to the most beneficial energy, whether it be a candle, an incense stick, yeah, and you just aspire that the reading is clear, and then you pick a card. You only need to pick one. You can also pick three if you feel you need more information out of those 22 cards. And let's say, for example, you draw in the Wheel of Fortune. So the Jupiterian energy would be very rich in your life at that point. So understanding the link to Jupiter through looking at that card and creating an interpretation. It's an excellent starting point, learning point, but also for divinatory practices, it's very powerful. It's a way of divining. So I'd like to offer that as a small little gift. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Awesome. And I'd love to hear from those of you out there in the audience that try this. Please provide your feedback. You can provide feedback on the podcast at the Astrology Hub's Global Forecast group. It's a free Facebook group, and we post the podcast episodes there, so you can just post your feedback if you've, about any episode. But if you're trying, especially that divination, would love to hear from you.
Yay.
All right.
I'll be looking at that too.
What's that?
I'll look at that too. I'm excited.
Yes. Perfect. And so now we'd love to ask what the audience, what all of us need to know in this moment. So no matter when we're listening to this podcast or watching this video, what is a message that is important for us to carry forward?
Okay. So a divination for all of you for right now, what you need to know. Okay. Amanda?
Yes.
I'll have you representing everyone watching. So please tell me when you're ready.
Now.
It's showing that we have to keep things very practical. We have to keep our feet firmly on the ground to be able to reach up to the heavens. It's not about flying away or losing ourselves in our interests. It's about grounding the energy and actually containing it, going back into the body and into the inner realms of understanding above all. So unification definitely is possible of what is above and below through the feet firmly being placed on the earth at this point. A lot of practical, earthy, tangible experiences that relate the sense faculties to our senses, with our experiences and not just our mind. It's saying this is a very important way to proceed upon hearing this.
Very good. Wow. I feel like that's such an amazing message for this whole year, really, right? But to have it come through in that moment too, it's like confirmation. Yes. Stay grounded, stay practical. Yes. Awesome. Tashi, you're so awesome. Thank you so much. For people who want to learn more from you, who might want to have a reading with you, tell us where we can find you.
Well, you can jump onto my website. It's tarotbytashi.com. And also I'm on Instagram and Facebook under the same name. It's easy to contact me that way. And actually, I'm offering a promotional reading for all listeners and viewers of this podcast. Three Fates reading, it's called. It's a great way to connect with me, looking at the energies of the past, present, and future of the seeker. And I'm offering that at a special rate of $33. So yeah, just reach out and I'll be happy to do that whenever you get in touch.
Awesome. And so they just have to say that they heard you on this podcast, and then they get that special promotional reading.
They do. They just have to mention my beloved Astrology Hub and this podcast.
Yay. Oh my gosh, that's so generous. Thank you so much, Tashi. It is always a pleasure to spend time with you. And I'm looking forward to the part 2 of this episode where we can go through the minor arcana.
Me too.
All right. Okay, Tashi, thank you so much. Anything else that you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, just don't give up, everyone. Don't lose hope. I think the divination is really important. And also an extension of that is just, believe the light is brighter. Just trust in that. The darkness is a complement to the light. So don't get stuck in dualism. Rise above.
Thank you.